in the previous video we talked about how to start doing photography. If you haven't watched that video yet, it's up here. You can go check it in the iCard. And I would suggest you go first watch that video so that it would be easy to understand this video. Alright? So, in this video we are going to be discussing smartphone photography. I'm going to be giving you some tips which you can use to up your photography game. And for this video purposes only, we are going to be restricting ourselves to the auto mode in phones that we get. And if you don't know what auto mode in phones are, what are you doing with your life? Alright, so before beginning, a full disclosure, auto mode is not going to produce some super duper cool pictures that you will boast about with your friends or post on Instagram to get tons of heaps of likes. But it is a start towards all the good stuff. Alright, sounds good? Let's begin. Number 1, grid. So if you have ever searched about photography or anything in cameras generally, you must have come across these types of photos. Like, what are these, man? What do they even mean? These are just lines. But no, they are not just lines. They do solve a very, very important problem. And that is composition. So composition is basically how photos or how things will look in your photo. And it is mostly for the aesthetic purposes and also to make your photo visually attractive. So composition is used in those purposes, and 3x3 grid is one of the most used grids to solve the problem of composition. Now composition can be a hit and a miss for you. Composition sometimes might be good, sometimes might be bad. You just have to experiment with it. But 3x3 grid is arguably the most used composition tool in photography. You see these 4 lines, 2 vertical and 2 horizontal. These lines are used to place the subject in the photo. So you take a subject and you place that subject in those 3 lines, and specifically those 4 intersections. Those 4 intersections are very, very crucial to composition. Mostly when photographers begin, or even the pro photographers, when they use the 3x3 grid, they try to place the subject of interest in those 4 intersecting points. Like somehow it makes your photo appealing or makes them have some good composition. But do not restrict yourselves. If you find that these things are not working for you, you can also change it up. You do not need to restrict yourselves to these tools. You can change it up. If you think your subject will look good in the lower part of the photo, yeah, that's okay. If you think the subject will look in the upper part of the photo, that's okay. If you think the subject will look better in the middle part of the photo, that is also okay. But as a rule of thumb, try to use this 4 intersecting points so that in the beginning you will get an idea of what making composition is, and going forward it would become an important thing. So it will also give you a basis of that composition thing. So please use the 3x3 grids. You can find them in your phone settings. Just go in the settings option and you will find grids, grids or lines, something. Turn on the 3x3, 3x3 or 3x3 you can say, whatever. So turn on the grids and start using them. It will be good. Number 2, AI. Now AI is mostly coming baked in with your phones these days. Like even 10,000, 15,000 phones have AI these days. Like previously they used to only come in iPhones or Samsung flagship phones. But these days they're also coming in the cheaper phones. Below 10,000 also sometimes we can find good AI. So AI is very, very useful, and it is only going to solve more and more human problems as we go forward in the future. But as of now, AI is pretty good too, and you should try and use AI when you click your photos, because AI knows many things that we humans cannot purposely adjust in the camera. So what AI does is when you point your camera towards anything, like say it is a human, it is a mountain, it is a lake, it is a beach, anything, AI knows what it is the camera is looking at, and it will optimize the camera settings and will apply some filters, do some editing, so that the final photo that you will produce will come out to be exceptionally well that you would not have imagined. So AI is very, very good in those places. But AI has some disadvantages too. I would say it's a 6 on 10 on hit and a miss, and sometimes it can mess up your photos pretty badly. You need to kind of experiment with it also, and need to figure out what AI is doing and what AI is not doing. Like, it sounds counterintuitive. AI is there to help you, so why you should understand AI. But since AI is not that good in the present situation, you need to do the rest. Alright, so use AI, but use it wisely. It can be very, very useful for those run and gun photographers who just want to take pictures and then do not do anything. AI will do the rest. Leave that to AI. AI will do it. But if you want to get your hands dirty, use AI sparingly, but do use it and understand how AI works. Number 3, HDR. So HDR stands for high dynamic range. So what it basically means is how every photographer will explain it to you as how whites are your whites and how blacks are your blacks. Yeah, went over your head, right? Yeah, same with me. So how I like to see it as okay, first you need to understand there are 3 parts of a photo, and those are called highlights, midtones and shadows. So highlights are those parts of the photo where the photo is having the most amount of light, and shadows where it has the least amount of light, or you can say the brightest part of the photo or the darkest part of the photo. And somewhere in between there lies midtones, which is kind of a between the highlights and the shadows. It's kind of a good mixture of the two. Like it is not too bright, but it is still bright, and it is not too dark, but still dark. So these are the things: highlights, midtones and shadows. Now when you understand these 3 things, you can understand HDR pretty easily. So what HDR does is it employs a method of toning down the lightness in the highlights and increasing the light in the shadows, so that the photo has an even balance of light in all of the places. There is no very high contrast in the photos, there is very little contrast, but the photos that turn out are actually good. It employs 3 or 5 photo strategies. So what it basically is doing is clicking 3 or 5 pictures even, and after that it merges it so that it can produce a single picture, and which will have the individual quality of 3 or 5 other pictures. It is very, very complex to understand, please bear with me with this. So let's say the HDR is clicking 3 pictures. One, it is clicking a very overexposed photo. The other, it is clicking a very underexposed photo. And the third, it is clicking where the photo has an even amount of light. And after that, it will merge those 3 photos. So what it is doing is taking the brightest part, that is the highlights, from one photo, the shadows from the other photo, and the midtones from the other photo. And then it is merging all those so that it makes a good balanced picture all around. Now HDR is not mostly used by photographers who are pro in their niche, like they know how to do it, but sometimes they also employ HDR. This is mostly used by beginners, and as a beginner you need to understand HDR, because HDR can be a very good thing and it can be a very bad thing also. So you see how when we make coffee we need to whisk it. If you whisk it just as much as you need it, it will turn out to be good. Just like HDR, if you do it sparingly or moderately, it will be good. But if you're gonna whisk the coffee more and more and more, it's gonna taste bitter. And same with HDR. If you're just gonna bump up the slider of the HDR to its full capacity, it's just gonna F up your picture. Like there's literally no coming back from that. So you might need to use it very sparingly and very intelligently in the beginning, and after that you can experiment with whatever you want. Alright, so HDR is mostly used when there are a lot of colors, or there is a lot of light shiftness in the photo, if you can, for the lack of a better word, light shiftness. The different amounts of different parts of the photo have different amounts of light. So when you need to balance the lights, you need HDR. And say if you are going to a garden, use an HDR. Because in the garden there will be a lot of flowers of different colors. You will need HDR there. But don't use it while shooting a portrait. You do not need HDR while shooting a portrait. Alright, moving on. Number 4, the phone flash. Now you might have seen the flashes that we get in phones these days, which can be used as flashlights also, and sometimes used as flash, like taking pictures also. Yeah, that flash. Please stop using it. Flashes are not good for your photo. It is only going to ruin your photo. Please trust me on that. Flashes have never been good in cameras, let alone phones. So what flash does is it will decrease your field of view of what you can see in a photo. Like say if you're just using artificial light or even the natural light like the sun, if you take a photo with artificial light or sun, it will turn out to be way better than if you use a flash. The photos taken with flash cannot even compete with sunlight or artificial light, and it reduces the quality of the photo, and it will also make it grainy, and you will lose some resolution also in the process. Don't use it very often. The only case where you need to use flashes is when there is literally no light around. Like literally it is pitch dark. Only in the worst case scenario I would suggest you to turn on your phone's flash to click something. Alright, moving on to the fifth one. And this alone, believe me, can change your photography game. Focusing and using exposure. For this purpose, I'll just set up my phone here. So you see I've opened my camera app. Notice when I will click on the screen, two circles will appear, one yellow and one white. The one with white color represents the focus and the other with yellow color represents the exposure. So focus is basically how much sharpness a particular subject in your photo has. And exposure is how much light the subject has. We can manually set our focus and our exposure as we want it in the camera apps itself. It is a very, very good thing which I do not see many people use, but it is a very, very underrated thing. And as a beginner, I think you should start using it because it alone can make a big dent in your photography game. Alright, see, I just tabbed it, the yellow one and the white one. So I can manually drag the white one to wherever I want to focus in the particular part of the photo. Let's say I want to drag it here. I drag it. I want to focus on something other. I will drag it here. I want to set the exposure to some particular thing. I'll drag the exposure circle to that particular thing. I want that part to be exposed right. I don't care what the other part is, but I want this part to be focused and exposed more. So I'll do it here. Now say I want to take a picture of the clouds. Like if I point my camera to the clouds, it is just going to be totally blown out. So I'll tap on the sky, the exposure circle to the sky, which will set the exposure according to the sky. And then there is one more thing that I can do with exposure circle. I can tone down how much exposure or how less exposure it is going to get. It is very, very useful and you need to understand this. If I lower the exposure, it is going to tone down the exposure. If I increase the slider, it is going to increase the exposure. So it will be fully blown out and in one it will be fully dark. So what I would do instead, I would just find my sweet spot where I think the sky looks good enough so that I can capture it, not to make it look very artificial. I'll find the sweet spot and then I'll just tap on the capture. Done. Alright, so here was the video and I hope you learned something from this video. If you didn't know that, if you have anything to say, you can say it down in the comment section. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe and help me out by sharing this video with your friends, and thank you so much for your time. I'll see you in the next one.